In this video, we will be reviewing the Eaglemoss Star Trek, the official Starships collection, Eymorg Starship. It was used in the 23rd century, a crew of 1. Its propulsion was ion, and its origin was Sigma Draconis 6. Now, this is from that famous or infamous episode, however you want to look at it, called Spock's Brain. The Eymorg Starship, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, had an unusual configuration and was much different to most vessels used by Federation worlds. The front of the Eymorg Starship was a spherical dome, and it was surrounded by 5 pods, with each one containing an ion drive. Incredibly, the technology used to create the ship was first devised by the Eymorg's ancestors 10,000 years earlier. The Eymorgs, or Eymorgs, and the Morgs lived on Sigma Draconis 6. Their society was an example of retrograde civilization, of which, at its peak, it was more advanced than 23rd century Federation capabilities, but after an ice age, it slipped back to a primitive level. Kara was the leader, and she piloted the starship that intercepted the Enterprise in 2268. Once she had beamed on board, the Starfleet ship used a device worn on her wrist to render the crew unconscious. Her mission was to surgically remove Spock's brain and take it back to her home on Sigma Draconis 6. Interesting design. Of course, I don't think we saw this in the original series. This is the HD series they've updated here years ago. The Morgs were the male inhabitants. They lived on the icy surface and had reverted to a caveman-like existence. The knowledge of the teacher passed to Dr. McCoy allowed him to breeze through the procedure of reuniting Spock's brains with his body, and he claimed it was so simple a child could do it. However, before the operation was over, the knowledge faded, and Dr. McCoy was forced to rely on Spock to help him finish the surgery. Do you remember that, when Spock started to help McCoy through his own brain surgery? And there's the teacher. Oh, the rear of the Eymorg starship was almost entirely made up of its ion propulsion system. There appeared to be one large central engine surrounded by 5 smaller engine pods. It was incredibly fast and agile, and completed the journey back to Sigma Draconis 6 in about an hour, whereas it took the Enterprise around 15 hours to reach the same destination. Ion drive. I write stuff on my hand to remind me of stuff. A psychological anchor, if you will. Ion propulsion. Almost all Federations relied on warp engines, powered by antimatter reactors to travel faster than light. Another propulsion technology was an ion drive. This worked by generating a continuing thrust and constantly accelerated the ship ever greater velocities. Another place of technology that the Eymorgs possessed was a device worn on their wrist that featured a number of buttons. She was able to render the entire crew unconscious. Later, the same device was used to induce crippling pain. Very, very, very nice graphic. Apart from the Eymorgs, the only other species known to use an ion propulsion on their ship was the Akraterians, whose homeworld was the Delta Quadrant. Their ion engines were fueled by perilithium. Sigma Draconis is a real star in the northwest part of the constellation Draco. It is 19 light years away. Designing the ship. Neil Ray. Now, I'm not familiar with him. The finished design of the remastered Eymorg Starship better reflected the idea that it was extremely advanced and fast. It has also fulfilled the brief that it was unlike any vessel that Starfleet had seen before. I like it. I think it's interesting. Okay, here's the ship as it appeared in 1968. So it did appear in that episode. It was more of a conventional rocket-shaped design. The special effects back then were severely limited by the budget, but they managed to meet requirements of the script, which asked for a long, slender, needle-like vessel. It was difficult to film the original 1968 model closing in on the Enterprise with the filming technology they had back then. In some of the shots, it was almost lost against the starry background, while in others it looked more like the starship had appeared in the 1950s from Tom Corbett or Captain Proton. And producer Gene L. Kuhn, they talk about him. A lot of his episodes featured, his name was featured on a lot of the episode end credits. Arena was written by Kuhn. Without Kuhn, that later we would never have had one of the very best Star Trek movies, The Wrath of Khan, and the augments on the Enterprise. Oh, I guess Gene, he wrote the episode Space Seed with Khan. And there's the Horta. And many of Kuhn's scripts were about trying to understand the forms that were radically different from humans. Metamorphosis with Zephyr Cochrane. Strange how that fits in with Nemesis, if it does at all. Oh. Funny episodes with Harry Mudd. Love it. Trouble with Tribbles. Spock's Brain. Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, about racism. That's the thing about Star Trek. It was always had a lot of social commentary. Okay, this first appearance was Spock's Brain. That was its only appearance. And in an animated series, they talk about Spot's Katra. If you haven't seen the animated series, I would recommend it. It's pretty good. So let's take a look at this ship. Now it fits on, interestingly, the base fits one of the engine pods. And Eaglemoss did a great job with this one. Look at that Aztecing. It's a 5-sided ship. It's hard to tell where the bridge would be, if there is a bridge. It only had a passenger of 1. There are some seams there, as you can see, unfortunately. Mold lines, you could also call them. Come on, camera. There we go. Sorry about that. Looks like there might be some paint rub. Thank you for the translucent parts, Eaglemoss. Very interesting design. I like it. Where else are you going to get these designs? Of course, if you want to, you could pause it.